So great to be here with you today. So last week I had the opportunity to meet with Rashawn and learned a fun fact. We both have a passion for aviation. I married a pilot, and with that passion, I also have a great fear of turbulence. That it makes him very disappointed in me because I still do not understand physics. So do you want to share your fear of aviation?
Yeah, so which is funny, working for an airline for most of the last 21 years. I don't have a fear of flying, but I've always had a fear of heights. And so there's a point, I've told people who know me, there's just a point after takeoff. It's usually like 90 seconds into the flight until about 5 minutes later, where we're just high enough off the ground that I'm scared to death, right? But then right after that, like by the time you hear the double chime, I'm perfect. It's all good. But yeah, first right after takeoff, oh, that's so cool. Okay, I can't let it.
So not just the passion for aviation and our weird fears, but we also started our career in PR, in journalism, love storytelling. So, and then we made pivots in our careers to something totally different. Tell us a little bit about how you got to your current role within United and where your career started and how you got here.
Yeah, I was one of those people, went to journalism school in Chapel Hill, Go Eagles. I knew I was going to be a journalist. Didn't know if it was going to be print or television, but it was going to be one of the two. Finished college, hosted a radio show, and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I actually like this journalism thing, and for some reason, people like to hear my voice. I hate to hear it myself. Okay, so my laugh is going all right so far. Yeah, the short version of the story, I ended up in corporate communications. I did that for most of my career. About 5 years ago, I said, I want to do something different. At about the same time that the then chief marketing officer at United said, maybe not these words, but I'm going to put words in his mouth, but it was some version of, we have these awesome sponsorships. We have these awesome partnerships, Chicago Bulls, New York Giants. You start naming one, you got to name them all, right? And we don't really get a lot of credit for it. We're not doing the right things. We should find a way to do things that make more people interested. Let's get that PR guy who can sell ice to Eskimos. He didn't really say that, I was complimenting myself. But I was like, okay, we can decide or sort of design partnerships and activations around what's going to reach more people. And so that's how I ended up in sponsorship.
Well, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about aviation and marketing aviation. I've heard you say that airlines are extraordinarily simple and complicated at the same time. What do you mean by that?
So every airline, for the most part, buys planes from the same manufacturer: Boeing, Airbus, Embraer. There are a few others, and you get people safely from point A to point B. Right? That's what we all do. Fairly simple. Where it is complicated, though. So United is the largest airline in New York, Washington, Chicago, Houston, Denver, San Francisco. The second largest airline in each of those cities. So in San Francisco, the second largest airline is a region, hyper-regional, right? Mostly on the West Coast. In Denver, it's a low-cost airline, sort of no frills. The thing that makes a person in San Francisco choose to do business with the second largest airline is not really the same thing that makes a person in Denver choose the second largest airline, because the alternative is very different, right? The alternative is very different. Where marketing for an airline becomes more complicated when you think about sort of local marketing, right? When you're thinking about individual consumers, what is it? How do we understand what it is that makes that Denver consumer choose this brand that is mostly flying in the United States, all coach seating, line up based on what time you arrive at the airport, versus the second biggest airline in New York, which looks a lot like United, and the second biggest airline in San Francisco, which again is a more regional carrier. So that's where the complication comes in, right? How do you become more local and become more relevant to those different communities to reach the person who is representing another?
Well, so let's build on that. I think in addition to the localization, United Airlines is one of the oldest airlines in the world, and brand awareness is not your issue, right? So if we're looking at a brand awareness play, getting more eyeballs, there's a lot cheaper ways to do it, more cost affordable ways to do it than partnerships and sponsorships. So how does United approach the fact that your consumers purchase or interact with United out of need? So they need to get from point A to point B, and you want to ensure that United Airlines is top of mind.
Because an American 737, a United 737, a Delta 737, and the Southwest 737 were all made by the same aircraft manufacturer. They all use the same type of seat bought from the same manufacturers. To the consumer, just the physical experience is not very different, right? So you think about sort of the abstract experience, obviously, but the physical experience, the seatbelt is the same, right? The leather seat is the same. We think about sponsorships from the standpoint of not, again, to your point, not simply about eyeballs. There is nobody who has never heard of United Airlines, right? There's always somebody. Actually, think about it, right? There's somebody out there. My nephew is 10. He's never heard of United Airlines. He probably has, actually, for me. 10 months is actually my nephew. He's 10 months old. We think about partnerships from the sponsorship from the standpoint of how are we encouraging that person, activating that purchase decision, that in the moment of the decision of making the purchase, right? Why are you picking our 737 rather than another airline 737? What is it? What emotional connection have we created with you as the consumer that makes you think, I heard about United, the price is about the same, I'm going to pick that. Or the price is $5 more, I'm going to pick that. So that's how we think about the value of sponsorships and the value of partnerships.
So let's talk a little bit more about now partnerships and inclusive partnerships, which is new title, right?
Correct.
Inclusive. Okay. We did our prep meeting last week. We had some more conversation today, and one thing that came up was when referencing a partnership, it's not you are a partner of Team X. You want to be a community partner. So how do you create the partnership between United Airlines and a brand and the communities that you serve? How do you identify what that really pyramid looks like?
By show of hands, I don't know if anybody watching virtually can see the whole thing. By show of hands, if I said United Airlines is an airline, who's surprised? Raise your hand. All right, cool. That's what I thought. So what happened? Nobody really laughed though. That time. Here we go. All right, here we go. Come on, right? One of the things we think about is, right, to be the official airline of the Cleveland Browns, call it, right? Somebody sees United Airlines. Nobody's scratching their head wondering what category United actually filled, right, in that sponsorship. When we did that sponsorship, we said, we want to be the official community relations partner of the Cleveland Browns, right? Let's talk about that relationship differently. Let's think about how we activate that relationship differently. Everyone in Cleveland knows we can get you from Cleveland to point B. But why don't we talk about our relationship with the Browns from the perspective of the veterans that we can fly into Cleveland for the veteran themed game? Why don't we think about the relationship with the Cleveland Browns from the standpoint of the principal who is beloved by thousands of students who will be flying United this Friday to LA for the Super Bowl, sponsored by United and the Cleveland Browns, right? And I'm gonna say as a quick aside, I gotta give a shout out, I'm sorry, to Brady Kellogg from the Denver Broncos who came here, and I'm talking about the Browns and the Browns. Sorry, man. Of course, I did say I can't call any brands because there's always another brand, right? We love the Broncos too. We sponsor the Broncos business groups, right? The Broncos said, we're in a pandemic. How do we help small businesses? And we raised our hands very early. You know what? How do we help you help the small businesses who are struggling during the pandemic?
So let's talk about the pandemic.
Oh,
The whole thing. Every industry or any industry that was impacted, aviation, sports, entertainment, they were greatly impacted. How did you pivot your strategy, or how was the work that you did previous to the pandemic preparation for what you did to amplify more inclusive partnerships?
So it's interesting. We actually started back in 2018 thinking about sort of doing activation planning based on what sort of benefit we could create in the community. I'll tell a quick story. I'll use an example. I hate the abstract, right? Let's just dig into it, right? So we were signing an agreement as a partner with the New Jersey Devils. Not a big surprise. Okay, you all know the New Jersey Devils play hockey. Not a big surprise. Most fans of hockey are white. New Jersey Devils play in Newark. Most Newark residents are not white. The New Jersey Devils, one, want to do great things in the communities where they serve. They also want to diversify the sport of hockey in the fan base. It's good business. It's also good for the community. So what we did in 2018 to launch that relationship was rehab a playground at a charter school in downtown Newark. So I had the pleasure on day one, first day of school in August 2018, watching this playground get unveiled. And it's like, just the shape of the room was perfect. Like the auditorium is here, and they open up the curtain, and there's this brand new playground, and the Devils mascot is out there, and there's a street hockey rink there. So we're teaching, these Black and brown kids about hockey. There are lots of different sports out there that are expensive to play and perhaps not as accessible to you, but we're now making them accessible. And the pollen count was high because everybody was in there like doing this. The moral of my people laugh again. Yes, all right, I can loosen up now, right? So the moral of the story is we had a lot of experience, a fair amount of experience doing sort of community-centric activation. We had basketball court, Golden State Warriors. So we had done a fair amount of that. And then when the pandemic begins and all the arenas are closed or there are not actually games happening or events happening, it was very easy for us to go back to properties and say, let's just do more of this, right? And our counterparts at all the properties were saying, yeah, we don't really have anything to sell you. I'm like, that's okay, because look at this thing we did with the Devils, the Warriors, and others, and we all just jumped in and just created all sorts of new amazing stuff, if I do say so.
I agree. Okay, so let's talk a little bit, kind of go back to really customizing these partnerships based off of the properties and making sure that the partnerships that you're moving forward with resonate to the communities and are true to the United Airlines brand. So I would imagine the partnership structure that you do in Newark looks different than in San Francisco. So how do you work with your brand partners to make sure that the message is true to the United Airlines brands, but then resonates and is true and meets a need of that community?
And we all have a lot of data. Every property has data about who their fans are. We all have information about what is relevant in the community, so what the challenges in the community are, right? And every property has sort of the organizations they're trying to reach, people they're trying to reach, right? Is it veterans? Is it African American business owners? Is it women-owned businesses? So it's data and research and conversation just actually make it fairly easy to figure out what does the Newark community need, right? One of the tenets of sponsorship, right, is that you should use sponsorships to make the fan experience better. And I was not necessarily the smartest person on the face of the earth, but I always thought, fans have experiences in the arena and driving to work. Fans have experiences when they're going to the coffee shop. And are they seeing a bunch of businesses that have closed down because of the pandemic? If we can work with the Denver Broncos or property X, I said I wasn't going to name properties, but it's Brady there, I'll do it. But if we can work with different properties to make a community better, to help a small business stay in business, to give middle school and high school students a safe place to go after school and shoot basketball. These are not hypothetical things, right? That's the sort of thing that we can do to make the fan experience better, right? It goes beyond what's happening in the arena or in the bowl or wherever it is that they interact with the property.
Can you share with us one of your partnerships that you're most proud of?
So that's a softball question right there, but it's also a hard one. So it's not a softball.
It's like picking your favorite kid.
That's right. We have 30 something in there, and I would say this: none of us at United would be doing our job if we didn't have a great relationship with all of them, right? If we couldn't come up with some amazing things with all of them, we wouldn't be doing our job. But I will point out this year, we announced sort of a change to our PGA Tour relationship, and hopefully y'all have heard about this, but pretend you didn't, because I really want to talk about it, like it's a big deal, because it is a big deal. But we've been partnered with the PGA Tour for about a decade. And for the better part of the decade, most of our activation was centered on 4 regional tournaments. we would, what I call build a box, right? We'd have a activation space, have people come in, employees and customers would come in and eat and drink and be merry and have a great time. And any of you who work in sponsorship know I'm not telling you secrets, that costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time. And what we did, I'm getting that 5-minute thing. I knew the time was gonna be so fast. But what we decided to do was take all of that contractual investment with PGA Tour that we had been putting toward hospitality at tournaments, and instead moving it to a joint PGA Tour program, a joint United PGA Tour program to fund travel for the golf programs at 51 historically Black colleges around the country. So it's the right thing to do because we all like to create opportunity where there's an opportunity to create opportunity. It's also brilliant business sense for PGA Tour, right? Like hockey, golf is extraordinarily white and older, right? PGA Tour wants to do the right thing and the smart business thing to get younger fans and more diverse fans to grow the game of hockey. There's not really a better way than to go to young people in their late teens and early 20s who are playing and help them play professionally. There was a line in the Greensboro News and Record that I read yesterday. The head coach of the golf program at Winston-Salem State University, historically Black college. I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but he said, "This grant for the United is a game changer. It opens up more opportunities for new tournaments for us to go to, and it helps us with our recruiting efforts." So here we are helping this historically Black college recruit, right? They're having a better time recruiting. And then some of the students were like, "Oh man, this is awesome. We'll do things we hadn't done before." And I have decided there might be some young kids who will look at a Black golfer and say, Michael Jordan, right? So proud about that.
But you should be. I'd imagine there are people in this room today who are responsible over the stewardship of their brand and the partnerships that their brand goes into business with. What advice would you give them to enhance or elevate or create a more meaningful and impactful partnership?
I'd say for the sponsor, think about the people you're trying to reach and think about his or her or their entire experience, right? Mike Pitts at the Warriors once said to me, I never had heard this before, but 1% of NBA fans will ever see a game in an arena. Think about the 99% who never will. What does their life and their experience look like? And how you can improve that experience. For the sponsee, for the property who's trying to sell the sponsorship, I would say the same thing. Play the long game, right? I know sellers have goals. You got to raise this much money this month and this much this quarter and this much this year, and I get it. But your need to sell something is not more important than the work we're already doing with the 35 or so properties we already have. But I always appreciate when somebody says, I've got this idea. I'm just going to leave it with you. And you know what? 6 months from now, a year from now, come back to me and we can talk if you want to. I could really quick my New Jersey Devils example. Leo Edwards, who left the Devils a couple years ago, he had come to United probably 3 years before we did that. And we used to just text and, hey, brother, how's it going? I'm good. How you doing? Right? And then it was about 3 years later that we finally did a deal. So I'd say to the sellers on the property side, patience is a virtue. I know your bosses don't necessarily think that when they want revenue to come in the door, but the long-term relationship, a busy buyer will always appreciate you having presented an opportunity and sort of left it with them, right? My email, I don't erase a lot of emails, all people.
Wouldn't you say though, it's also playing the long game, but taking the time to understand the business need of your brand that you want to partner with?
That helps, but I'll also, here's where I'm going to be a little more generous to the salespeople. Yes, it helps. It helps when if you understand that United Airlines is looking to do community investment, not hospitality, right? Because I said property a month ago, reach out. We can give you tickets to X, Y, and Z. But with that said, I don't really expect people to study my business and know it the way I do, right? So, I will temper my expectation, right? But it is helpful to understand a little bit, but, you have a job to do, and so we can make this about it.
So I know we're out of time. I have a final question for you.
Oh, we're not out of time. They discussed. I'm kidding.
I feel
Hey,
so
you're the
many
one
words.
in between people and lunch.
And lunch, I know.
Oh,
We're the
sorry, y'all. Sorry.
Final question. What brand do you look up to who's doing sponsorships and partnerships right?
Did we rehearse that? I don't remember.
It was on the prep sheet.
What brand, Maggie? What brand do I like? Can I tell you that? United Airlines. They are really good. And that, by the way, was the head of advertising at United Airlines. She knows what she's doing.
Well, hey, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I love it.